Welcome to Course Mastery for Public Policy. Today we're going to focus on your new first edition text by Sarah Rinfret, Denise Sheberly, and Michelle Pouts, Public Policy, A Concise Introduction. In this module, you will learn all about the Rinfret story, its strengths and organization. We will also dig into how it differs from the other public policy texts on our list, like Kraft Furlong and Peters, and also what your sales strategy should look like for this title. Along the way, you will also be hearing from author Sarah Rinfret. Let's begin with her quick introduction to why they wrote the book.
We, as teachers, scholars, find it really important for our students to be able to apply theory to practice. And we didn't feel like, there's a lot of great texts in the market, but we really wanted to be able to provide a skill set for our students walking out of our classroom. And so something that's very tangible, but also to public policy is about more than, how a bill becomes a law. It's also about the implementation piece. And so we wanted to make sure that our students have that applied experience, and that's why we're very excited about this book.
So let's dig into the story of this new title. Public Policy, A Concise Introduction is a student-friendly primer that quickly connects readers to the inner workings of public policy. The book is really geared toward undergraduate students who are being exposed to public policy for the first time and encourages them to think critically about various policy questions and realize that there is not always just a right and wrong answer, but an entire spectrum of possibilities. This book is great for your instructors who say, my students just don't connect with the material. They don't see why public policy should matter to them. The book also takes an applied approach. The authors really want their students to be able to apply the theories discussed in class to real-world public policy issues. This is great for instructors who want to encourage their students to get involved in public policy. Public policy texts are typically divided into two sections, foundations and then specific policy areas. Rinfret does this as well, however, it condenses the early foundational chapters on theory and the policy-making process, which allows students to get into the policy challenges chapters, such as immigration, education, and healthcare, much earlier in the semester. And these are generally the areas that are the most engaging for students. There are a few key features in Rinfret which work together to engage students and encourage active participation. One of the most popular features according to reviewers were the policy choices sections. These features challenge students to go beyond just picking a side when discussing policy issues and realizing there's not just a right or wrong answer. There's a whole spectrum of alternatives, and you need to analyze each one individually in order to come up with the best solution.
One thing that we did with the policy choices that was really important for us and why we included in the text is that public policy is not this bimodal distribution in terms of us versus them, and to really make thoughtful decisions to benefit all citizens in the U.S., regardless of who you are or where you're coming from, is that we have to come together. And so what we have used, I piloted drafts of the textbook in my public policy class this past fall. And so when we'd finish a unit, we would talk about different policy choices. And so students would present different perspectives. And then we'd end the class session with, okay, well, here's two perspectives, but what about, the in-between or a variety of perspectives, and just really grappling with, because we've been taught since, elementary school or high school that there's two choices, you have to pick one or the other. And then students really realize that, when I take a step back, we actually have to work together, but also there's probably 5 or 6 different options that we need to pursue. So that's something that we really, really were excited about. That's really missing. I know there's a lot of great case study books, but it's, again, that bimodal distribution, and public policy is more about multiple perspectives instead of two.
Another popular feature with reviewers was the chapter opening vignettes. These short stories open each chapter and seek to bring the topic being discussed in the chapter to life for students. They include some of the most current examples of public policy in action today, such as what life is like living on less than $2 a day in America, the legalization of marijuana by several states, and gun violence on campus. When students are engaged with the story or issue laid out at the very beginning of the chapters, they remain engaged with the chapter content that delves into how to solve these policy issues. Another feature of the book is telling stories with data. This feature invites students to evaluate data in order to determine its credibility and its impact on a particular policy issue or dilemma. The last feature to note within the Rinfret text is the Everyday Citizen Connections boxes. These link theory to practice and are another example of the book's applied approach. This feature illustrates how real people are affected by public policy and shows students how they can actively engage in the policy issues that matter to them. Here's a closer look at the overall organization of the text. This is important because, as I mentioned, Rinfret condenses the foundational material on policymaking and theory in order to get students into the real-world policy issues chapters earlier in the semester. Section 1 really lays out the foundations for the book. It introduces the necessary skills and tools to understand how and why public policy is created, evaluated, and explained. It goes deep into the actors involved and who actually does public policy. Section 2 contextualizes the doing side of policy. Chapter 4 is especially unique. It describes what happens after legislation is passed. How does that then translate into rules and regulations for organizations and individuals to follow? What happens after a rule goes into effect, and how do state inspectors ensure compliance? Section 3 is the substantive public policy issues portion of the book. It's really the meat of the class where students should spend most of their time. Each chapter in this section follows a similar chapter structure: overview, history, major statutes, contemporary issues, and challenges. So there are really 3 things to know and 3 things to show with the Rinfret book. You should know this book is very engaging and student-friendly. It's really focused on getting students excited about the public policy course. It takes an applied approach. It really wants students to be able to go in and utilize the theories that they're learning in class towards solving public policy issues. And this book is focused on policy choices, teaching students that there's not just a right and a wrong answer, but an entire spectrum to the choices you can make. And the 3 things to show in the Rinfret book are the opening vignettes, the table of contents, which shows the condensed early chapters, and those policy choices boxes. So let's take a look at the difference between our CQ Press public policy books. Rinfret is your newest addition to the list. It's brief, lower-level, introductory, perfect for undergraduate classes and students starting out with little to no background knowledge. This book is perfect for instructors that want to get the nitty-gritty details of policymaking and theory out of the way early so they can focus more of the semester on the substantive policy issues. Craft and Furlong came out in its 6th edition last year. This is already one of the best-selling books on the market. Its focus is heavily on policy analysis and is generally geared towards a more upper-level or graduate audience, although it does get used in undergraduate courses as well. But this book really looks at how different kinds of analysis are used in support of political arguments and how to evaluate public policies. The Craft text is known for being detailed and thorough, but it has also been critiqued for being pretty rigorous. You also have the new 11th edition of Peters coming out this summer. American Public Policy takes students through the governmental systems and core theories of policymaking before turning to in-depth exploration of key policy areas and tools of policy analysis. Again, this book is geared toward a more sophisticated audience and is more dense than the Rinfret text. This book has a pretty loyal following and is generally used in graduate departments. The sales strategy for public policy is to find out what your instructor's goals are for the course and who their students are. If they're hardcore policy analysts and policy-making junkies, Rinfret may not be for them. But if they're student-focused and want to use an applied approach, show Rinfret. Take time to look through any lost opportunities you may have for Peters and Craft and think about the level of those schools. Did they need a more student-friendly approach geared towards an undergraduate audience? Go back in with Rinfret. Also, ask your professors, how much time do you want to devote to policy making versus digging into actual current policy areas? This book aims to get the process out of the way first so that instructors can talk about what really matters, like the environment, education, and civil rights for the rest of the semester. Your go-to competitor in this area is going to be Cochrane's American Public Policy. This is a Cengage title that goes for a whopping $200 price point and has over 500 pages. However, it is similar to Rinfret in that it has a format to its substantive policy chapters and has a strong focus on current events and policy. The last edition was in 2016, so we could expect a new edition next year. So let's steal away the business before that comes out. If the length of the book isn't an issue for instructors, then the price point certainly will be. Cochrane is the #1 top seller in the market, so let's take it down. We'll end this section with a word from Sarah Rinfret about the competition for her book.
You know, Mike Kraft and Scott Furlong, both two used to be my colleagues and still are. And I used to use that textbook, but I feel like it's a nice complement, so I'll use a couple of those chapters for policy analysis. But a lot of the students really struggled with it because I feel like for more of an introductory public policy text, they really struggled. It was just beyond their capability in terms of the policy analysis process. I also used to use the Brooklyn book with the same issue. Students really complained about it just wasn't accessible for them in terms of what they are grappling with on a day-to-day basis. And so we really wanted to, I mean, this is really for our students. I mean, we care about their involvement in public policy. And so really making sure that they're able to apply that theory to practice and provide experiences for them. And I think that's one of the greatest things.